today's webinar. We're going to talk about the gamification and cover a few things. Just quick background, I've been doing innovation management now for a little over 5 years. Had a chance to do a lot. I've done it on the product side where I looked at gamification from a feature set. And with Hype, I'm actually consulting with clients, so I've had a chance to actually present on gamification and other innovation-related issues and techniques, with Hype now for several months. And so I'm looking forward to being able to blend that together in today's discussion. Okay, so with that, let's talk about it. First, gamification overview. Okay, and there's a lot of different ways people are going to define it. I think it's important that I set down a kind of a marker of what gamification is. Second, the title of this webinar, right? Lies and damned lies. I'm going to talk about some of the ones that come into play there. Then, oh, wait a minute, Mitch. I'm not sure how this got in here. Guys, we have a flash poll. Something has come into the presentation. Let's take a look at what we've got here, guys. All right, so the flash poll, you're not going to be, this one we didn't plan for. We got a couple polls coming up in the webinar. We didn't plan to have folks interact on this one, but I'm going to go ahead and put it up here. So, flash poll, I think this is going to be important. Folks can look at this and kind of understand. I'll be curious what people's perspectives are on this and evaluate it. So gamification, it's going to give meaning to people's lives, and I think that's an important thing to say, right? Gamification will actually really, suddenly people who have been a little bereft of meaning in their lives will suddenly gain it through gamification. Second, it might make us joyously sing sound of music at work, right? Suddenly it's happiness, it's fun. That is what gamification is about, and so I think that's going to be important. Or third, you might think it's actually going to increase the company revenue by 20%, and really, the stock market and everything else, who couldn't use that these days? So that may be one point of view about gamification. Alternatively, you might think of gamification that's going to manipulate people. It might actually, this dark side of it, it turns people into mind-numbed robots. Or maybe you might think of it as it's a productivity killer. This gamification, people are going to be doing nothing but playing games at work. It's going to be some sort of massive on-player game. Or perhaps you might have the worst view of all, that it's going to allow firms to unethically take advantage of workers. So, there's nothing to really click on the screen right now, but just something for you to consider where you kind of fall in the spectrum of these two kind of, it's called polar opposites. All right, well, back to that. Okay, so enough of the flashpoint. We're done with that. Okay, so let's finish it up. We're going to talk about what works. Okay, so that's an important element as well. So let's do an overview. Now, I'm going to start with this, and I'm going to come at it from my innovation perspective, okay? And these are things I've heard over the years, really, and especially on the product side for sure, and then actually we're working, face-to-face with clients, things that I hear that people are interested in when they get their innovation programs going. Well, I want people logging in, especially for new people, new people with new innovation programs. This is a big thing. Will people actually bother to log in? I want people to post ideas. It's funny because you think, I'm running an innovation program, what else would they do? And yet there's always this kind of concern about whether people actually follow through on that. And I want valuable feedback on other people's ideas. That's an important element as well. It's not just the ideas, but it's getting that feedback. Other things that people want. They want quality contributions in general. That's going to be a good idea. It's going to be a good comment, those kinds of things. Who are your innovation catalysts? Who are the people that are really delivering a lot of energy around innovation and actually helping spearhead it? Because that can be such an important part of a program in large organizations. I want collaborative teamwork on ideas. I want people to kind of work together to build the idea. And also, people should actively manage their ideas. They're going to get feedback in these comments. They're going to learn things offline in conversations. And you want people to make sure they're actually updating their ideas. So these are some of the things I've heard that are really important in terms of innovation programs for clients. And hopefully for folks on the call here, this is something that resonates with you as well. And so how do we get those outcomes? Now, it's kind of funny. This slide is almost like, it's like the vegetables in the meal, if you will. This is like, you came here to hear about gamification, and this might be the most important slide I'm going to present today. You've got to get the fundamentals right first. Gamification is not going to be the primary driver of the changes you seek. It's an amplifier. I'm going to talk about that as we go through here. The keys the keys that are going to be drive an innovation program really are, I like to bucket them, but leadership. You have to have a clarity of mission and deeds, not words. Awareness. You got to make sure you have share of mind. People have to know about the innovation program. Engagement. In other words, this is engagement from senior leadership with employees everywhere, employees across the different kind of divisions, those sort of things. And governance. You have a plan. What's your plan for turning ideas into action? How will you do that? How will you determine what that good idea is? How you select them? How you actually then develop them, iterate them, trial them, go to make them scalable? None of this has to do with gamification, and this might be the most important slide in this entire presentation. Gamification will not fundamentally change your innovation program. The keys are going to be these kind of elements I'm showing right here. Okay. That being said, what is gamification? I've got a couple definitions here. One is the application of typical elements of game playing, points, competition, rules of play, to other areas of activity. Okay. Another one, gamification by definition is about applying game design thinking to non-game applications to make them more fun and engaging. The thing about those two definitions, and I've run into these kind of variations of these definitions, they seem to be very mechanics, more feature-oriented. They also put a lot of focus on fun, and I am all for fun, but I don't think gamification necessarily is rested only on fun as being the primary driver of what makes it work. So from my perspective, these definitions aren't sufficient for understanding gamification. So here's a definition I like to use. Incorporation of stimuli into an activity to influence people's actions towards desired outcomes. Let me just kind of run through that, because each part of that has a particular factor that has to be considered. Incorporation of stimuli. Now, stimuli, often, like I said, gamification comes down to, well, do you have leaderboards? Now, do you have points? That's a stimuli. Sure, it is a stimuli in its own way. But I think it's a lot broader. I take a much broader view about the notion of what it is that that you can actually use to influence people. Into an activity. Now, I say that because one of the things that's important to note is that gamification is a layer that you use with another activity, a core activity. It's not the sort of primary mode, it's not actually making it into a video game itself. It's actually, you have to already have another activity. To influence people's actions. And that's important, to influence people's actions. And that's the best you're going to do. You're not going to, we're going to talk about the lies coming up, but it's just not a case where people are going to be sort of turned into automatons that are going to do your bidding. You can influence people, but they have to be willing to accept that influence as well. Toward desired outcomes. That's the other thing. You have to think about what it is that we're trying to achieve. A common complaint when I see critiques of gamification, and it's fair, is just add points. Points to what end? Why? Those kinds of things. So you have to think about the outcomes you desire. Now, the previous slide, I talked about some of the things that people are looking for in their innovation programs. But that's an important part. The other part is subtly in this one. I know, like Gartner with Brian Burke and others will actually orient gamification towards people achieving their own personal goals. I take a little bit of a different tack on that. I think that's actually one thing that is for sure you want. But I also think it's important to consider organizational goals as well when you're doing gamification. So I deliberately say toward desired outcomes without describing, is it a personal outcome I'm trying to achieve or the organizational outcome I'm trying to achieve. Now I'll talk a bit about what motivates us. There's intrinsic motivation, and that's one of the things, that's Daniel Pink right there. What the desire act comes from within. You want to better yourself. It's mastery. It's curiosity. The things that kind of really drive us to again do our, to act in certain ways we do. But there's also extrinsic motivation, and the desire to act is a response to external stimuli. Now, on this slide, I'd like to talk about this, and this is where I add a bit of a kind of an economic argument to gamification. And folks, if you remember your Econ 101, you might remember things like Udels. Udels was a favorite subject back in Econ 101 for me. And generally, the Udel is the measure of value you derive from a thing and how that kind of curve changed over time. So this simple graph here you'll see here, quantity of an activity and the value derived per unit of activity. There you go. Now, what gamification does is it actually adds a way of increasing the value derived for each unit of activity. So in other words, I was going to do the activity anyway, and there's a certain value in doing it. But through gamification, what it does is it adds an additional element of value to me above and beyond the activity itself. By doing that, that's what you're trying to do is you're increasing generally the quantity of a particular activity you're seeking. And I look at that, I really think in terms of economics when I talk about gamification. There's really got to be a sense of what is the value derived. And the value derived ultimately is personal. The person's decision to participate in any kind of gamification scheme really depends a lot on, well, what's the payoff? What's the value I derive from doing this? So I add that as a kind of, I think it's important to note that that is a gamification element. I don't see a lot of talk about that, but I think that's an important part of why the value of gamification. Now they say here, it's a means of shifting the utility curve out. Okay, now we had the flash poll. I don't know how that's kind of an Easter egg. I don't know how that thing got here. But now we're going to do this. We're going to do poll question number 1. Yeah, there you go with sound effects. How much is gamification currently used internally in your organization? And what I'm going to do, and Mitch, I'm going to fire it up here. I'm going to launch one of the polls here. So we have an initial poll here. Okay, and we'll go ahead and launch it. So you're going to see on screen the poll that's going to launch. And folks, just take a look at the different answers there. And what I'm just trying to get a sense of is how often, how much is gamification currently being used, in this process. So there you go. I think I can see some people voting here. So I'll just keep it open for a bit. And you'll see there that they differentiate between cases where gamification might be kind of used in a spot way in a particular department, might be like a narrow function. I'm aware, like I think it was WestJet, I think Canadian, they were going to gamify expense reports. So maybe like a little thin layer might be used somewhere in your organization that way. So yeah, it's kind of curious, and I think this is for a lot of folks on the on the call. I'll show the results after we're done. You can kind of get a sense of who you're watching this with, if you will, and their level of experience with it. All right, we're looking here. All right, looks like from what I can tell, I think we've got everyone's voted. So I'll give you like 5 more seconds to vote. If you want to get in there, and I'll close it off. All right, let me go ahead and close. I'll share it. Okay. And what you'll see there is that actually, just about half the webinar participants have actually never done any gamification. That's fair. That's fair. And I think that's actually important to know. And then I see another 30% have used it for some specific activities or at a departmental level. Okay. And we do have a very few that have used it widely. That's great. All right, so that's good. It gives a sense of, it helps me to understand the folks that are, your level experience with it. So, great. All right, so you can keep that. If you want to screen grab it there, you can screen grab it just for your purposes. And I'm about to hide it. All right, great. All right, so now we're back on, moving on here. Okay, lies and damned lies. Yep, I mean, that's part of the fun of this thing. So I'm going to start with this. Gamification definitely has become buzzy. It has been buzzy. I think in 2011 it really started to get launched, and you saw a lot of coverage in 2012. And it's always interesting when you run to Google, like how often is a term getting searched on and looked at? And after the initial buzz of 2011 and 2012, did it fall off? The answer is no. And if you look here, you'll see that it continues to actually escalate. So clearly there is a growing popularity about in terms of gamification, of understanding it, curiosity about it, wanting to know more about it. And as I note here on there, strong opinions have formed, both positive and negative. So the lies, damn lies, they go both ways. And I've created here, you call it the opinions ledger. And I'm on the one side of the people that are just, super excited, enthusiastic about gamification. I mean, it's all positive. The things that it can be done are incredible. On the right side are the more the negatives, the folks that say, look at this and go, oh, this is atrocious. And so let's talk about both sides. So on the left, drudge activity becomes meaningful and fun. Yeah. By the way, I'm going to go through each of these separately on the slides that are coming up here. Disengaged employees become engaged through gamification, the magic pill of gamification. And finally, good employees will be retained by companies using gamification. On the right, gamification is a manipulation used to fix people. And I actually found that one writer really concerned about gamification made that statement. Gamification means turning everything into a game, and people just cannot abide by that. They've got serious work to get done. And then this is one of my favorites. I can't be influenced by gamification. That's actually it's all surface level stuff, and I'm much more into deeper meaning. And I think there's some truth there, but we'll talk about that as well. Let's start with this one, the fun drudge work. Got to get those TPS reports. So drudge work becomes meaningful and fun. So the basis of his position is that gamification leverages our natural interest in play. And you'll see that. If you do any kind of research, it talks about that. That's, the proponents of it, or even the critics of it, talk about that actually is what the objective is. We like, there's a natural interest in playing. So introducing gamification infuses any activity with this playfulness. That's great. If you want to do those, well, if you want to do the expense reports, you got to get them done anyway. Let's make it fun. And gamification can bring bigger meaning to activities. I've seen that as well, that you can tie the more mundane tasks into a broader story, a broader meaning for why you're doing it. I tend to look at it this way. From my perspective, the reality is that gamification is an amplifier, and I talked about that earlier. It's an amplifier for behaviors people would already do, okay? But it does not magically turn tedious chores into fun activities. The core lack of meaning is unchanged by gamification. And hats off to the gamification proponents who propose that you can develop epic meaning on mundane chores through gamification, but I don't think that's the case. I think epic meaning comes from a bigger, go back to that earlier slide, leadership, clarity of mission, deeds, not words. That's really where meaning starts to comes into play for the employees in the organization. It's not a gamification element. Next one, re-engage employees. So you say disengaged employees become engaged through gamification. So basically the position is that gamification can create epic meaning for the work that people do. I didn't see that, That's a great concept, right? Epic meaning. It sounds kind of cool and hip, say epic, anything. Think about skiing. But, okay, so we've got that. And then employees have a reason. I've got this in quotes because I actually saw this. Employees have a reason, aside from their job titles, to, quote, actually do good work. I thought that was one of the more inane comments I think I've ever seen, that gamification will actually make you do good work that you wouldn't normally do. But there it is. The reality is that this is the argument to me is this is the equivalent of saying that a structurally unsound building becomes habitable because you gave it a new coat of paint. You've not fixed the fundamentals. In poor working environments, gamification will be seen for what it is, a Band-Aid that avoids authentic change. And that is, I think, for a lot of folks, that resonates. The notion that if you don't have the fundamentals right in terms of direction and the way the organization works together, the way employees are treated, and then you throw on some sort of gamification technique, it's going to backfire. And I don't think it's an opportunity to re-engage employees at all. And then retain good employees. Good employees will be retained by companies using gamification. Again, I actually saw one consultant that is heavy on gamification put this. I said, the status and benefits gained from gamification will cause employees to reconsider quitting. So you might have been thinking, hey, I think I need to move on. Maybe I need to change. Oh, wait, I've got these points and this status. Why would I give that up? Gamification is not just an amplifier, but a primary decision criterion for why you work. Okay, so that's essentially what you're saying there. And from my perspective, and I think of a lot of folks, I can see if you agree on the phone as I say it, why would you consider staying or quitting a job? I mean, what are the factors you would think? The fit of the job to one's interests, right? The management style of your boss. I mean, I think studies have shown that's probably one of the biggest issues that determines whether people decide to stay with a company or not. Pay, obviously, right? The HR benefits, the growth potential of the job, the organization culture, flexibility you might want for family obligations, the commute itself. There are some particularly heinous commutes. We'll get those out here in the San Francisco Bay Area. People have that. I think a lot of factors would come into play before gamification would ever be something that would cause somebody to stay, decide whether to stay or not with the company. So again, yeah, I mean, it was put out there, so I'm going to call it out. That's one of those lies. Okay. So those are three on the positive side. Go to the negative side now, the dark view of gamification, that it's manipulation. It's used to fix people. That, the allure of games is so powerful that people will engage in behaviors they wouldn't normally. Companies, and then the other thing, I think you have to look at it this way. Companies are known to try unethical means to manipulate their employees. You have to actually believe that that's a regular practice out there in order to buy off on this. And the gamification fits that agenda. And I think the reality is, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. If a company actually tried the Band-Aid of gamification, it wasn't going to fix its fundamentals, and it was just going to kind of slap on some points and maybe some prizes, awards. I think people would kind of see through that because nothing fundamentally has changed. And so my quote there about fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, would be some people, you might be able to initially to get some people to go, well, I'll try it, this seems a little different, but when nothing else has changed, inevitably it's going to fail. Employees only consent to gamification, on these three things. And this comes from the University of Pennsylvania. I really like these three rules here, these three factors. The rules are understood, okay? The process is perceived as fair, and they volunteer and engage in the activity. In other words, this is the activity they're going to do anyway, and so you're not forcing people into something that they wouldn't want to do or shouldn't be doing. Next negative, everything becomes a game. And it means that, wow, gamification is essentially, the base of this position is that gamification is essentially a video game concept, which is not true. Gamification proponents think serious endeavors need more fun, right? So if they say that, then everything that, has to be serious about getting that project done, they'll just make it a video game. And gamification will undermine productivity and make games the primary focus. The reality is, I say this is a fundamental misunderstanding of gamification. We're not laser blasting expenses, shooting birds at ideas, or crushing project deadlines like candy. Gamification is a layer on existing activities, not a replacement of existing processing tools. And that's why I think it's important. I go back to the definition I use. It's the incorporation of stimuli. In other words, it's not turning things into a video game itself. That there is a field of study that talks about game-based approaches. Gamification is not that. It is actually, the introduction of these gamification elements. Finally, I call it gamification immunity. I can't be influenced by gamification. So the basis of people think, it's a buzzy concept that offers empty calories, kind of like cotton candy or something. I take pride in the quality and seriousness with which I approach work and life. And gamification is going to fade away like a bad Taylor Swift song. That's going to be the shelf life of gamification. The reality is, gamification, you're soaking in it. And I talk about this, gamification, the stimuli, it's an existing activity, there's a desired outcome. They're used in many places. It's part of everyday experiences. And so just a few examples. Top left are the frequent flyer programs that airlines run. True story. The guy, Colin Nelson, who runs our strategy consulting group, he and I were in New York and we had to fly to Chicago. And we both got to LaGuardia and took the 6 o'clock flight to Chicago. It just turns out I arrived later than he did by about 20 minutes. Why? He took American. I took United. We actually have status on, each of us has status on those different airlines. It was a stimuli that affected our behavior. Yeah, and I think if you see yourself participating in airline frequent flyer programs, yeah, you're participating in gamification. Same thing goes with credit card points. I personally participate in one of those as well. Love it. In fact, becomes a favorite item way to issue out Christmas presents at the end of the year. You can use those points. Lower left, this is something I don't know about you, but when I drive to Tahoe in my car, I have a trip mileage, gas mileage tracker, and it becomes a game for me. I actually try to maximize that number to be as high as it can be on the drive when I go to Lake Tahoe. And yeah, it's my own personal game, but certainly I alter my behavior because I can monitor how the mileage, how my mileage or kilometers per liter of gas is being used. And finally, lower right, this has become much more of the craze. The tracking your health. Nike has their app for this, and this is a case where again people are starting to actually set goals and track themselves towards their goals and try to earn those. Is it fun? Sort of. Maybe not fun in the classic video game sense, but certainly fun in terms of personal achievements. And this is gamification that I think we're all kind of experiencing it. We're all experiencing it. It's just a question of, do you recognize that you're actually participating in it in your daily life? And then finally, and the bad Taylor Swift music will actually fade away. So shake it off. All right, so let's see what works. Let's talk about what works. How about this? Why don't we just have some gamification? Now that's a lot, isn't it? And that's just a start. I pulled this from Scavenger, their secret game mechanics play deck. Badgeville has a nice gamification wiki they run. And hey, what works? Pick one of these. Actually, frankly, it's a little overwhelming. There are a bazillion different types of game mechanics and gamification techniques you could apply. I don't find it useful to kind of just necessarily just initially look at a long list of things. So one of the things that helps me, and I hope you'll see if this resonates with you as you look at this, is to think in terms of gamification categories. And I think of 4 categories for gamification. First is achievement. I work to attain an objective. Okay. Next is recognition. My contribution is acknowledged in some way. Third, competition. I compete for a limited number of awards, and I think the limited number is a particularly part. If it's unlimited number of awards and awards out there, I'd call it more of an achievement. But competition means there's a finite set of something, and only a few people are going to get it. And then valuables. I want to secure something of value. I'm going to talk about each of these 4 in the next few slides here. they're roughly, you know, I think when I think about the ones that are probably the easiest, the ones that maybe have the kind of best profile in terms of how much effort to put in and how much value you get from it. I think recognition is huge. I think achievement is good. It takes a little more work. Competition has its place, and we'll talk about that. And then valuables, we'll talk about that as well. I think often that's thought of as the reward programs. So let's start with the achievement. Okay, things that are good to know about this particular gamification category, this type of gamification. I look at it as being consistent with Daniel Pink's view on employee motivation, mastery, and purpose. I think about, and I'm specifically referring to things like drive, what motivates us. I run into this a lot. I run into on both innovation side and also a lot on the kind of the social business side. People are big fans of Daniel Pink, and rightly so. He's done some good work there. And so I look at achievement as the gamification category most closely aligned with what Daniel Pink has espoused, and that's that's where I actually get I actually work toward the benchmark and I achieve something. Creative goals just can be structured for individuals or teams, and that's interesting. When I'm saying they're structured, one of the things you can set up are particular missions or goals that for folks to achieve, and then track it and monitor it and publicize it. And then the other thing to know is even incremental achievements are valuable for motivating continued engagement. And that's important. I think that's really important, because I think it may feel like sometimes you have to have epic achievements, I climb Mount Everest type of level. It doesn't have to be that way. It can be very small things, but those small little things that people achieve go a long way towards stoking their interest. I also would characterize achievement as being probably the most sustainable of the categories. It's something that people always come back to and return to because it's very much a personal thing. Challenges: interesting goals can be set, but it does require some planning, monitoring, and awareness. Okay, and one of the things I'm at the very end, I'm going to talk about five ways you can employ gamification, and then I'll come back on this one. And then also achievements: they need to be relevant to people and related to the broader objectives of an initiative. Okay. Recognition. Now, the things of recognition is, it's based on something we've known to be powerful for years, and I want everyone to think about, and I bet most everyone here has gotten this, the great job email. A senior executive, a boss, whoever, sends out a note saying, great job on that thing, and you're seeing either the company, their vision, your peers, whatever. Think about how that felt. And how much that kind of made you feel like that was great. It's something that you didn't know you were going to necessarily get at the front end, but at the back end afterwards, and it kind of made you, generally one of the things that it'll do is it'll still say, okay, that's actually what's valued, that helps me understand. So that's one of the things I think a lot of folks have known for years that has real value. Recognition can happen in the software. Now remember, I'm representing with Hype Innovation, so I'll certainly have some elements around that, but it can also be outside the channels as well. And I think the email, the newsletters, the internet, whatever ways. I'll give you one good example. One of Hype's clients, they I thought it was pretty cool. It was a small thing, but whenever someone posted an idea in a campaign that was being run, the innovation team, in a distributed fashion, they would actually tie a red balloon to the desk, and so overnight. And so when people come in the next morning, they would see red balloons on the different desks. And it was just a very small thing, but it was a recognition just for like, hey, thank you for participating. And I think it was really great because it's a gamification, because people go, well, that's kind of fun. There's that fun element, right? But it also says, okay, so this is, it keeps awareness going and makes people go kind of feel good about the effort and good about their own submission. So I thought that was really nice. So recognition can happen in a lot of different ways. And also, recognition is a powerful signal about what is valued, and that's probably the most important thing. When you recognize something, particularly an executive sends out a kind of a, hey, great job kind of email, what that does, it is a powerful signal in the organization. It says, here is what we value. So that's something very important to know. It's a very powerful means of gamification. Challenges. You want to ensure that the recognition relates to the larger goal and influence the behaviors that are most valuable, like I said, and that's something to keep in mind because it's going to be a powerful signal about what's valued. The other thing is take care not to overdo recognition, because it can become it can be cheapened by being overdone. If every little thing can be recognized potentially, suddenly it's not such a special thing anymore. So, competition, okay? Competition. So it taps into an instinct that is strong in many of us, and it's just an interesting one because especially folks that have done athletic endeavors, maybe back in you know, grade school, high school, college, or even participate now, maybe in you know, football, soccer, or other type of things. You get competitive. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of competitiveness in folks. So that's something that's generally been there for a lot of people. Social comparison now. That's an important part of competition too. Is, you know, how am I doing relative to others? There is a certain competitiveness that does go with that, and it's now much easier than it used to be due to the software platforms. It used to be hard to know where people stood, private conversations, separate emails you didn't know about, but now in a kind of a more public way, people can see how others are doing, and so there's a benchmarking element that the social comparison allows now that really we didn't have before. And it can be employed in selective fashion to achieve specific goals. I think that's an important point. You don't have to make the entire thing one large, massive competition. It can be used in a spot way, spot basis. Competition, the challenge is competition done wrong, it'll kill your collaboration. Worst example might be something where whoever's ideas move forward are going to win a car, and everyone else gets nothing. Or I'm just making it up, but something like that. Well, why would I help someone else if I know that I've got an idea? I don't want to help someone else's idea. I want the car. So you have to be careful with the competition on these things. Many employees will be turned off by too much competition, and that's a reality. If it feels like it's all competition, no collaboration, no personal mastery, I think that can actually start to reduce the value of the competition in this for the folks, and actually can poison the well. And then finally, I think this is interesting. It's called the N effect. Motivation is maximized when people perceive only a few other competitors, and that's you can look up the N effect. I thought that was an interesting finding. What that means is that, particularly in large platforms where there's going to be hundreds, thousands of people participating, if it feels like a large competition amongst all those people, you may not see the benefits you expected, and so you may have to be clever in ways of using competition, but not make it feel like it's a competition against thousands necessarily. Finally, valuables. Rewards are the most commonly understood form of valuables, and I think that's something you do this and you get an iPad or whatever. But the reason I use valuables and not rewards is because I think it includes other stimuli. And for instance, one of the things I think of is acting before time runs out on something. So basically, you need to get something done, because once the time runs out, you've lost that ability. So that's a valuable. I want to secure it. It's not an achievement. It's not recognition. It's not competition. If there's something that value that I want to get done, and I have a limited time to do it, I'm going to do it. And valuable, you also don't have to be monetary. I think a lot of folks, and we'll talk about that as it goes along here in a moment. Challenges. Valuables plus competition can equal unintended consequences. And I'll relate a story, a true story of that. Like I said, I've been doing this for a little over 5 years, and there was one time a well-known airline, actually, they ran an internal innovation initiative, and they ran a campaign, a challenge. And what happened was this: there were a limited number of I think it was like Amazon gift cards, $50 gift cards that you could earn points by participating in the innovation platform. And if people that earn enough points would be able to kind of then turn around and redeem them for those Amazon gift cards. But they're only a limited number, only a few, so you had to be fast. So you've introduced competition because people are competing to get to that number quickly, along with valuable, something of value. Can you guess what happened? It was a free-for-all. You had all manner of participation, but was it the right kind of quality participation folks were expecting? Not at all. It was just pell-mell. Just let me earn those points so I can actually, get to be the first to achieve the thresholds to get the gift cards. That's a great example of sometimes you have to be careful with valuables in competition. They can be used, but think clearly about what the consequences might be by putting those two together. Next, provide rewards that resonate with employees' interests. I'm going to show you a slide as we go along that talks about that. And then finally, tie the valuables to outcomes you want. In other words, don't reward quantity unless that's an outcome you want. So if your quality is what you're looking for, then you want to actually figure out ways that would become the basis of awarding valuables. Okay, with that, yes, there it is. Poll question 2. All right, and so Mitch, I'm going to fire this up here. Okay. All right, here you go. So you're seeing this. Which 2 gamification types do you think best fit your organization's culture? We just went through a pretty detailed review on the different ones, and one of the things I'm never quite sure is how do folks feel like that works within their own organization. And of course, it's going to vary by company. Some may be highly competitive in nature, and that's just the way it's going to work. Fair enough. But the others, it's not quite the way they would actually want to run their gamification. So take a look at it. I'm asking for two. One of the things that with GoToWebinar is you can't rank order them. So I thought the alternative is pick the two that seem to resonate the most with you and how you think your organization would would work both best in your organization. So I see people are voting right now. That's good. Give you a little time to think it through, because this may not be totally intuitive. Number, achievement is something that is probably the closest to the intrinsic motivation. Recognition is the kind of acknowledging that people do, people's good works and how they, help contribute. Competition is kind of stokes those competitive embers to kind of get folks to, step up and do some particularly good work. And then valuables are, there's a certain thing that I want to receive, and so I know that if I do this thing, there's potential of getting that payoff there. So different ways to look at that. All right, and I see 70% voted of folks. This is good. We have another few seconds here, and then we'll look at the results. All right, looks like I think we've hit a point now. Two more people voting. Good. Okay. Good. All right, I think it seems to have gotten folks in now. Good. I'll hit close. And let's try to share that. And interestingly enough, recognition comes out number 1. Achievement number 2, and valuables number 3. Great. Interestingly enough, competition, which I always kind of wonder about, does come in sort of at the bottom of things, and I think it depends on the environment you're in. So that's good to know. All right, I'm going to take it off screen. If you want to screen grab it for your own purposes, something just for reference, feel free. And then I'm going to go ahead and hide it here. All right. Great. All right. Go ahead and hide that now. Okay. So we got that. So let's talk about some key design factors that I think need to be considered when you're considering gamification, when you're looking at gamification. First off, something we talked about earlier, and it's from the research from the folks at the University of Pennsylvania. People have to consent to the rules. They have to sort of say, I do buy off. I think you've actually, you, organization, have put forth something that makes sense to me. So I buy into your gamification. 2, payoff for participating is evident, whatever that is. And it may be something that's especially something I get to show off. It may be status. It may be satisfaction that I did well in a competitive kind of thing, or it may be I've earned something, so you've got that. Desire to participate in the underlying activity. That's important. I mean, if people don't have a desire to participate in the underlying activity that's being gamified, using that term, a little rough, but there it is, gamification is not going to suddenly make them do it. We talked about that earlier, one of the lies. I think one of the things is there has to be some desire to participate in the underlying activity, and if that's not there, gamification is not really appropriate. And finally, employ variety, because not every technique works for all. Some folks will be more motivated by status. Some are going to be more by competition. You can do different types of things. The other thing is, over time, particular gamification elements may eventually kind of start to slow down in terms of effectiveness. I think achievement might be the one that potentially has the longer legs. I think recognition also actually, I'd say that also equally has that. But it's just something, whatever kind of technique you might be employing, keep in mind that over time it will deteriorate in terms of effectiveness, and it's good to kind of shake things up periodically. So I'm going to end this session today on 5 gamification initiatives, okay? Points, reputation, leaderboard, idea progression, recognize quality contributions, missions and goal setting, and rewards. Okay. Now what you're going to see here, I'll probably, because I'm with Hype, and you may have your own platforms or your own other ways, so certainly feel free to adapt them to whatever other means you might have. But you're going to see some of this will include things that Hype Innovation does do in our software, just so you're aware of the ways that you can actually approach this. So points, reputation, leaderboard. So the technique is you get points for participation and for quality. I think that's an important part too. Not if it's just raw participation, that you're probably it's okay, because certain people want to make sure people participate. But I talked about earlier with that airline example, it can go the wrong way. So I think rewarding for quality is just as important. Actually, you can employ statuses based on point thresholds. So you see at a certain level, and you achieve a status. A great study was done by IBM. They had an internal social network. It was, I think, Beehive or something like that. And what they found that there was a meaningful percentage of people, not everyone, but a meaningful percentage of people who wanted to achieve a status based on the points that the Beehive awarded. And they hit, for some of them, that was the pure goal of participating, hit the status. Once they hit the status, they were done, which is kind of interesting. Other software platforms, you'll see it with Jive Software. I know they've got things like the Wayfarer and things like that as well. So that's certainly a place where statuses are used. And then also highlight your leaders. You can highlight them. So to the right here, you'll notice that this is like some of the things, like in the Hype software, you can have you earn innovation points, but it's a blend. It's a blend of participation. So did you post an idea, a comment? Did you vote? But it's also for quality. Your ideas get votes. That's worth something. If your idea advances forward in the governance process, that's worth something. If your idea is implemented, that's worth a lot. That's great. Some consideration. Also, you'll see before I go to that, you'll see on the right there my colleague Kitab. He's doing well. In fact, you'll see here he's got his innovation points. You can see his comments and ideas, and you'll notice he's got a status and a reputation. The 5 stars is the highest level that you achieve within the Hive software, and Kitab's just been killing it. And I can tell you, as a colleague, and he's very impressive. And so that's a fair assessment of how he is. But again, it's also a marker. It becomes a little bit of a badge. People can see. Now I see how Kitab is, and I go, yeah, no, that makes sense. And it's a continued reinforcement of how well Kitab does in his job. So a great opportunity for folks there. Considerations: decay the points. Again, I'll reference that IBM study. One of the things I did find was that the effect of earning points and statuses started to decline over time. And the reason was because you hit a certain level, and then you've kind of done. It's over. Their particular system, it never decayed. So decaying the points means that folks eventually will start to fall back down to earth, if you will, and to maintain that status, which they do enjoy, they'll have to have a kind of an ongoing participation level. You can also reset the points to allow new leaders. That's the other thing. These leaderboards sometimes get kind of, crowded. They get kind of static at the top. And so by resetting, new leaders can emerge over time as people start to get comfortable with collaborative innovation and do things. And communicate the basis for statuses. Again, people should need to understand the rules. How do I earn this? Why would I earn this? So it's important actually that people buy into what's going on. And the 3 categories that this particular technique addresses are achievement, a change of status and achievement, recognition, especially when you get badged and people know about it, and to a certain extent, competition. When you have used leaderboards, that is a competition because there's only a limited set of folks that are going to show up on leaderboards. Idea progression. Think about this. This is basically, technique is here is to provide a clear process of advancement for ideas. And then the ideas that do advance, make sure you highlight them, okay? And what you see on the right here is a campaign flow that does work within Hype, the Hype innovation platform. Again, you may have your own particular approach you have around this, but this is the way it works in the Hype. And the nice thing with it is it should work in lockstep with your innovation governance, and I think that's an important thing. One of the things that will happen in Hype is an idea will move from kind of general community discussion into what's called hot status. And hot status is really the first cut. That's actually like kind of skimming the cream off from the rest of the milk. And what happens in the system is when it achieves that status, it gets a little banner. You see here on the right here, you see with the little computer, the printer there. The idea is hot. Again, almost like a badging. It's a recognition. It's an achievement. It's recognition. It feels good. And you also want to communicate the ideas in advance. And you can certainly do that. Those techniques within the system, like for the hot badge, but also outside of the system too. You can call out folks whose ideas have moved forward. Recognize quality contributions. So one of the things, and this is one of the things every time I work with a client, I advise. Review campaign ideas and comments to identify valuable submissions and highlight these in communications. Now, this is one of those cases where play to the ways that people are already expecting information, the way communication already works in the organization. And email is great for that. In fact, one of the things we advise from a consulting perspective is in the midst of the campaign, at the close of the campaign, let folks know what's going on. And particularly in both cases, it's a great chance to highlight quality. So, dear colleagues, and you can see it here, but I think it's important that you highlight not just ideas but comments. Because remember what I said, what you recognize sends a powerful signal about what is valued. And if it's just ideas, recognize that what people will start to take their cue on, oh, so they're only focused on ideas. So maybe it's not, from their perspective, is it worth the time to go ahead and do that comment they may or may not want to have time to do normally. But if you highlight comments and you show that you're reading them, and that good quality comments will actually be recognized, hey, you've actually sent a powerful signal. So recognize both the ideas and comments to the extent that you want comments to be part of the program. Consideration, so it is that people take their cue by what's recognized and stress the value of comments. So I've talked about that. So that's a recognition there. Missions and goal setting. The technique is to create a package of individual missions, provide recognition, or develop a team-based challenge. So let's talk about that. What I mean there is that you can have a mission where you say everyone who does this thing will get that thing or something, and whatever that thing would be. It may be special lunch or something like that. I also saw a technique described where folks, there was actually a central goal that the entire organization was asked to kind of help achieve. I think they used a tree. I got a puzzle pieces here, but the concept was this thing is not complete till every organization is part of it, and that's something you can do. You can look at your different business units, for instance, and have based on size and what their level of daily work is and their interest in this particular campaign. Let's establish some goals, and if we establish a goal, something good you can build in, something interesting will happen, and you can see what that would be. So, considerations: create missions that will further goals for the campaign and the innovation program. And just recognize that there's going to be a case of sometimes people are going to game the missions. Is there going to be a perfect mission that has no gaming in it? No. But just recognize that there'll be a little bit, but I don't think you throw out the baby with the bathwater on that one. Finally, rewards. Rewards here are, one of the things that I think is provide rewards that will resonate with employees. And to the right, this is not an absolute kind of matrix here, but I think it's a useful way to think about it. When I talk about rewards, I'll give you a couple examples of what I mean there. One of our clients, related to this story, they had an initiative where people who did did well on as part of that initiative, they would actually have the opportunity to have lunch with the CEO. I mean, sounds great, right? Turns out for this particular audience, that was terrible. They had no interest whatsoever in lunch with the CEO. These were frontline staff folks whose interests were getting the job itself, a good working environment, the pay they have, and then their lifestyle outside of work. And the idea of meeting with the CEO was actually horrifying to them. They just they were scared. That was a mismatch of reward to what actually would resonate with the the participants. But for some places, some organizations or some employees, that's exactly what I want. Finally a chance to bend the CEO's ear for this idea I've had for a long time. I'm looking forward to it. I got to earn this. So one of the things to think about is what would resonate with the audience. And so one of the things as I thought about it, there's a rewards appeal matrix here. Just think, you think about your audience and the cognitive complexity of the work they do. The more cognitively complex, the more it can't be standardized, the more they have to be creative and to be very highly analytical. I think that what appeals to them might be different from folks who have know the rules, have a basic job, and that kind of thing. And the ambition level, folks who do a job as more of a life, it's just a pay to sustain a lifestyle they enjoy. Perhaps they're really big on the outdoors, and the job actually lets them get out and explore and hike and do the things they like to do. May not have the same ambition level as some folks who are just gunning for the senior level positions. And so recognize your audience types and the type of rewards that would resonate with them. Or it may be as simple as hey, how about some iPads? If you hit certain points, you can redeem for iPads, those kinds of things. But it also might be, hey, the team that does this gets a day at the the Stanford D School. You can do it, or a week. You get a session. We're gonna have a week-long session of design thinking at Stanford D School. Hey, that might be for a lot of people really powerful stuff, much better than an iPad or an Amazon gift certificate. So there's a lot you can do with rewards. I think it sometimes feels like it's nothing but merchandise and cash, but there's a much broader way you can look at rewards. As I said, commingling competition valuables, be careful. Also, start conservatively. One thing a lesson that I've heard is that people who go really big on the rewards early, like the idea that wins this campaign is the person's gonna get a new car. Someone actually did that. Well, what happens is if you don't want to spend that much money to do a car the next year, people go, why bother? So I think it's better to start conservatively with this and build as you gain experience rather than go big early on it. And that's a wrap. It's time for Q&A. Again, I'm Hutch Carpenter, happy to talk with you guys, and You'll see there, it's my Hawaiian shaka. It means friendship. I love it, and it also looks a lot to me like the Hype logo. So with that, let me go ahead and see if there's a few questions there. All right. And if you want to type some questions in, that's great. All right. And here we go. All right, I do see a number of questions here. And let me just look here. I do see the slideshow for your reference. Yep, as Mitch did mention at the front end. Oh, by the way, yeah, I'll come back to that. He mentioned that, yeah, you'll be getting the presentation. Someone asked for concrete examples, and hopefully I just went through some very specific examples. It wasn't just lies and like gamification categories, but very specific things you can do. How to handle trade unions against gamification. And I'm wondering if that, I think that goes back to, and hopefully my very last slide there, I think the key with the gamification there would be, first, my sense is unions can vary in their particular, what they're sensitive to, how strong they are about work rules. I know for Germany there's workers' councils and things like that too. You'd have to look at it case by case. Certainly, if the union felt like there was a violation of any of their, rules by awarding, by giving rewards for accomplishing things, you'd have to consider that and work, directly with them. I'll be honest, I don't have enough experience personally working with unions to give you a good answer on how trade unions would work with that. Hopefully, the folks that participate would see the benefit and the value that the work they were going to do anyway. But now a chance for additional compensation or rewards, if you will, or recognition would be worthwhile for them. Okay. Yep. Okay. Good question. I'm going to read this one out here. It says, based on the 4 categories shared in the presentation, it sounds like gamification an updated perspective on traditional employee motivation theories. Is this a fair assessment? Yes. I like that. I think that is a fair assessment. I think that gamification is the buzzy new term, but I think the underlying concepts have been around for years. I mean, the examples I gave you of things that we've been participating in for a lot of us for a long time, before it was ever called gamification, have been around. I think gamification came about in sort of the popular culture has become much more about digital gamification methods, like having points and leaderboards that you can do because you can track actions taken in the software, stuff you didn't used to be able to do. You weren't able to do before. I know Gartner puts a heavy, when their definition of gamification puts a huge stress is digital. If it's not digital, don't think about it as gamification. I think that's wrong, personally. I think that as a practitioner out there working with clients, I see it as much broader than just the digital side. But I think the digital has sort of broadened everyone's perspective and made them aware of the concept. Do you consider regular management by performance objectives to be a form of gamification? That's a good question, actually. I do think it is, and I think some of the, again, I'll go back to what I said, I think a lot of the techniques of gamification have been around for a long time. I think the term has become buzzier and become something that we're much more aware of. I do think of it, the extent that one of the things that's key with gamification is there is a feedback mechanism and I can monitor how I'm doing. So as long as the objectives are something that are quantifiable and I can see how I'm performing, I think it fits well. I think a critique of management by objectives is that you only know something once a year at that annual review. And then I guess loosely speaking you might call it that, but I think the lack of any kind of feedback is kind of the critical differentiator there. And I think some of these new gamification vendors have started to actually add a lot more of the kind of feedback loops. And I think Salesforce bought a company that does that, for instance, that kind of incorporates that. So it's much more frequent feedback on those objectives. Yeah, thank you, Angry Birds and Super Mario Top. And my son, I told him I had, as you can see on screen there, I do have, I have the Creeper from Minecraft. Yeah, he was happy about that. All right. Yep, and someone actually just asked the same question about standard management by objectives, so it's twice I've said it, which is great. Again, my answer would be, I think the traditional lack of feedback to know how you're doing is probably the thing that would probably make it least like gamification. That feedback loop, your ability to see how you're doing and adjust accordingly, is an important part of any gamification. And I think if you're getting that, then I would actually have it fall under there. But without it, probably much less so. And I know we are kind of running at the top of the hour. All right. Yes. So actually, a number of questions here. Mitch, I think we're hitting 9 o'clock, top of the hour, my time, 9 o'clock. I think it's probably 6 o'clock for folks in Central Europe there.
That's right.
So,
well, however, as I said earlier, we'll get back to you and answer all these open questions. We've got a couple left, and but we want to release you to get to your next appointments, or for the European guys to get home now. It's about time. And I hope you found the webinar useful, and any kind of feedback is highly appreciated. As I mentioned, you'll get the slides and the link to the video, and we'll also upload the webinar recording to our homepage where you can find it and share it with your friends and colleagues. So thanks for your time, and I hope to be able to welcome you again soon. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.